Hello and welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today really it's going to be so much fun heading off to meet an incredible lady, Victoria Bhojwani Cunningham. She's the Director of Marketing and PR for APAC for Spartan Race, and she's joining us from Launceston. And a bit of a geography lesson for some of you that may not know. Launceston is in Tasmania, which is the island. It's part of Australia, but sometimes gets kind of left off the map even. South of Melbourne, Victoria in Australia. So wonderful to see you, Victoria. How are you?
Good to be on here, Chris, and I'm doing great. And you?
Yeah, look, I'm great, thank you. Really excited about having our chat because we only just met for the first time a little over a week ago when you joined us on our Mass Participation World web series, and I realized your incredible story. And it's great to come back and have our Aid Station viewers have the opportunity to hear your great story. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your story and how you got into Spartan and some of your backstory?
For sure. I actually initially started out in film and performing arts, so it's a funny way to get to end up in the the sports industry. So I mean, essentially, I was working as an intern in a film production company in Singapore, and then from there I went up to become an assistant producer. But I was fresh out of high school. I hadn't gone to university yet, and as an Asian. Having Asian parents, they were very insistent that I get that piece of paper. So I ended up applying to a few, and Tasmania actually gave me the best deal. They gave me a scholarship and like my first year off and stuff like that. So I ended up coming here. And one of the times I was back in Singapore, which is where I'm actually from, I got hired as a door host. The actual term is a little bit ruder, so I probably won't say it, but like it's the person who does the stamping, and I did like bottle sales at the door for VIP customers. So it was just like a fun uni job to, just to hang out with stuff. And the guy realized I had a knack for sales. So he let me do marketing. He was like, do you want to handle the Facebook page? I'm like, sure, okay. So that was my first actually experience with marketing. And then from there, he actually couldn't pay me very much, but it was like a barter deal. I did all that and I did my door host, and I actually got to use the club a few times a week to learn how to spin as a DJ. Yeah, so it was like a barter deal, and that was all done. I went back to uni, met my husband, had a baby, we got married. And then we moved back to Singapore for my parents to meet my son. So I called the guy who owned the bar and I was like, hey, I need a recommendation letter because I need to apply for work. And he said, oh, perfect timing. I have a job for you. And turns out he had a marketing digital agency startup. And that's where he hired me as a business development manager. So that was good. He really taught me everything I knew. And then I moved on from there. I got hired by one of our clients. So I only worked for them for 3 months because we didn't get along. But during this time, I actually did a favor for a vendor of hers. And that vendor was actually, their company was actually doing the Spartan race marketing. So I never heard of them at that point. But essentially the vendor told me, get out of this job. It's not good for you. I have this for you. I'm going to recommend you very hard. Go in and see him on Saturday. And this is literally like a few days away. And he said, do an interview. The guy's name is Sena. He's a CEO because Joe was living in Singapore at that time, 2015. So Spartan hadn't started yet at that point then in Singapore. So I went to the interview and it was at Joe's house. And it was in the middle of his children's birthday party. So I turned up and there's like screaming children running around everywhere around a pool at his condo. I'm like, what is happening? End up going into this like a common area where I met Joe, and here he is in like, shorts and t-shirt. And here I am so formally dressed. Just so strange, but essentially he and the current director of marketing, her name was Pudding, she was only with the company for like a couple of months. They tested me on the spot. They like asked me some fancy questions and apparently my answers were to their liking. So I got hired that day. Then I left my job and I went to work for Spartan.
Well, that's a great story. What a way to meet your future boss at a kid's party. So I guess fast forward now, you live in Launceston. and very different to Singapore. Obviously, a very quiet little, relatively sleepy town compared to a bustling city. What's life been like over the last few months with COVID, and what happens day to day down there?
We got very lucky. There were not many cases of COVID down here. And because of the small population and it's such a widespread area, social distancing was not very hard. So for a while, we had a curfew and just essentially, like everyone else, just don't go anywhere that's not essential. So, we tried to stay at home. Only my husband went to the supermarket. I think the biggest difficulty for us is that my son is autistic. So even when everything started to clear up and curfew was removed, there were more things like, don't unnecessarily touch things. He doesn't like hand sanitizer, he's so used to touching things. So for us, that was the biggest difficulty. But I've worked from home for a long time now, like since we moved back from Singapore a couple of years ago. And yeah, so it hasn't affected my work very much. It was difficult when my son was home from school for like 8 weeks. I was trying to manage him. There were very many mishaps with him, like just busting in the door and coming in the middle of my call, and I frantically turning off my camera. But yeah, other than that, it's been good for us. Tasmania, like I said, Tasmania bounced back very fast. Yeah, so everyday life has been okay since all of that has been sorted out.
And a beautiful part of the world down there. And I think, one of the things that COVID's shown us is that we're all humans. And, I've got a 6-year-old son, and I call him my coworker when he comes in. It's like, yeah, my coworker's just come in to join the meeting, and that happens from time to time. But, we get to meet people, we get some insights into them. You shared with me before the MPW thing that, one of the reasons for moving to Australia is the amazing support that the Australian government gives for people with disabilities, and I guess that's helped to some degree. And your great outdoors and everything, wonderful. But you said, I always like to talk about challenges. Talk about those challenges a little bit of how you've had to manage, whether it's about your son or whether it's other challenges. What challenges have you had to face during or what have been the biggest challenges you've had to face during the COVID period?
I think aside from what I mentioned about just, having him home all the time and not being able to go very far, the other thing is that I'm not able to travel home to see my family in Singapore, things like that. And work-wise, I would say keeping the audience engaged and keeping the content relevant, especially when so many brands are just pumping out, similar things. I mean, there's only so much we can pump out. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we have, especially us being based around, very heavy around races, signing up for a race, all the inspirational race content. That's been the biggest challenge. But like I said on the previous panel, out of this, challenging time has come some amazing stories from our community, people being resilient and overcoming all these, things that you wouldn't think would be a problem, like being confined to your house. Like, when you think about it, it's not something that you think, oh, I'm going to go crazy in my house. But then when you're actually stuck indoors all day, you find, people have been battling mental health issues, just divorce rates went up, just all these things that really, surprise me really to see. But one thing that I noticed is that because I grew up in Singapore, and this surprised me a little bit, that I was not affected at all by what the government told me. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I didn't feel like, no, I'm not going to, I didn't feel like that. So I was quite surprised because I was very rebellious as a youngster. So, but then now I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, I'll follow the rules. So I think I was a bit surprised about that, but yeah, I think for us, we're doing well. And I feel for a lot of other people who have more difficult situations.
Yeah, I think, that's a great thing, isn't it? I think, I always look at it and say in life, it's been one of my philosophies. There's always someone that's doing it tougher than you. We all have challenges, and you can turn them into opportunities. And you've certainly done that. And, we were talking before we started recording, as, it's wonderful for me to see as our industry goes through this forced, I guess, transformation, that we have these young leaders starting to rise through the ranks, and I'm super excited about it. Obviously, the future has to be about engagement that you spoke about. It's got to be about social marketing. It's got to be understanding of digital. It's all those kind of things. So, you know, in many ways, you're a young leader of the industry, and hopefully you'll stay around to be a more mature leader of the industry. But talk to me about leadership. You know, do you have leadership principles? You have an amazingly globally recognized leader as Joe de Sena as a potential mentor, I guess. But you know, what kind of tips and stories would you tell the viewers about leadership?
Yeah, like you said, Joe de Sena is an incredible mentor, and I got the opportunity to be hired by him and work with him for a whole year. You know, he lived 5 minutes around the corner from me, really, and I would be there, you know, even Saturdays and Sundays and whenever he called, essentially. So being around him was incredible to see what he was like. You know, I never really had a chance to, you know, watch the CEO of a big company up close like that. So, you know, just watching him balance his home life, the amount of phone calls, the amount of traveling, and yet he still very much listened to me when I had an opinion. Yeah, and he would ask advice. You know, he wouldn't force anything down anyone's throat, you know, unless it was a reasonable request that somebody was declining. But yeah, really working alongside him was amazing. Like I didn't feel second class to him at all. You know, so I think that's one really big thing that I took away from Joe, is that, you know, being a leader doesn't give you a right to be pompous or treat people like crap. He really treated me very, very well. And I see him do the same for everyone else. You know, and his family is incredible. He's such a family man. And I spent so much time around his family. I even babysat his kids. Yeah, you know, and it was just a great experience, really. Yeah, and I have some amazing leadership advice from him, that if this is a good time to put it in. You probably may have heard this story a couple of times. I think he did it on the Joe Rogan podcast, but he told me this very early on. And I think in the ground floor of his condo, when we're like walking by the pool, he told me he used to work or rather he didn't used to work, but he used to live near and around mobsters or mafia in his area. And really he took a lot of, you know, his learnings from them. They taught him a lot of valuable things. But the one thing that really, really stuck out to me was when his neighbor asked him over to come and clean his pool. And the advice that he gave him was, I'm asking you to clean my pool, but you know, you go around, straighten the furniture, clean the windows, mow the grass, do whatever it takes. Go the extra mile to make sure that I cannot live without your services, that you are like invaluable to me, the best service provider, and I always want to call you back, you know? So really, that really stuck with me, and I started to put that towards my work ethic. Like I didn't just do that one thing, you know, I would try and go the extra mile and cover it fully and do the extra, and just to make sure it worked, you know.
It's a wonderful tip. And yeah, Joe told me that story. I interviewed him in the early stages of this, and it's great to repeat it, because I think, you know, there's so many people in life these days that just do what they need to do, and it's those that create value. Successful business is about creating value. It's not about a transaction. It's about creating, well, it's, you know, that value, that transaction has to have value, but that extra mile. So I'm sure that will absolutely resonate. Thanks for sharing it. And as always on these aid stations, time flies by. We got time for one more question, and I'd love to hear. I'm sure, you know, you're an inspiring story yourself. Incredible what you've achieved already in your career, but something inspirational to end on, please, Victoria. I'm sure you've seen lots of inspiration around Spartan races, but something that you'd love to share from your life so far that would inspire others in these times.
Well, I just two things. My advice for people is that don't be rigid. Don't stick to that path that you think you have to follow, because, you know, look where I ended up. I didn't think I'd end up here from where I was. So, you know, that's my piece of inspiration and advice for everybody. But one really inspirational Spartan racer I really want to talk about is Misty Diaz. I think she has what is called spina bifida, if I'm saying that right. Yeah, and she's done so many races, and she's just so incredible. She's one of our, you know, very well-known adaptive athlete for Spartan, and she's just you know, every time she tells the story, it's always about her overcoming adversity. And then you just look at her and just, it's unbelievable, you know, how that she can do these things. She has these really cute pink crutches that she did diamante stuff on it. She's so noticeable. She puts herself out there to help others. Like every time I talk to her, it's about, you know, overcoming adversity and how she's putting her story out there and helping other people to be inspired. Like, you know, if I can do it, you can. She's always telling people, you know, and she's very real and authentic. And yeah, I wish I brought on like more stories about her and I could share more posts, but yeah, just go and look for her on social. Her name is Misty Diaz, and she's just as inspiring as Jo, you know. So yeah, if I can end off on that.
What a great note to end off on. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that I so love about our industry. There is so many incredible inspirational stories. And sometimes in sport, we tend to focus on the elite athletes, but there are so many everyday heroes out there, particularly in our industry, of people overcoming so much adversity to get to finish lines all over the world, or to get to start lines in some instances are a miracle. Just to get to the start line, and then obviously to get to the finish line is even more amazing. So what a great note to end on. Victoria, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time. I'm really looking forward to watching your star begin to, or continue to rise, and see you as a future leader in the industry. Wonderful to talk, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Take care. Thanks a lot.